expect us to believe that this place was built in the late 1800s by cowboys. It's massive. Mary Baker Eddy.
Right, she invented and started Christian Science.
Wow, look at that window on all that stained glass. And that's all stone, right?
The outside of it's all stone, the rest of it's wood on the inside.
That's wood?
That's the rose window.
Wow.
Yeah, it's wood. They just had that rebuilt this past spring.
That's absolutely... Look at the stonework, how it's cut perfectly around.
Oh yeah, they did it right. It was built in, they built this building in 1 year.
They built this building in 1 year?
Yeah, 1 year.
Wow.
Yep.
Look at the doors. Even the, now those aren't the original doors, are they?
I don't know if they're original. They've been here a real long time, and we just had them refinished outside.
Yeah. Wow.
4 inches thick.
Wow.
It's a real deal for doors.
So 1903, and they built it in 1 year.
Yep.
Incredible. It's almost like a miracle, right? Hey. All right, so that gentleman says this was built in 1903 in 1 year. I highly doubt that. I highly doubt that. What do you see when you look at these structures? What I see are things that just don't seem to fit in today's world. They don't just look like they were built a long time ago. They look like they were built using entirely different techniques. They were crafted with purpose, attention to detail, things that we just don't see today. You literally feel like you're in a different world when you're in the presence of these buildings and these sculptures and even the furniture. It just stands out. And then you compare it to the buildings that we have today, you don't get the same excitement when you see them. You don't get excited to walk inside a modern building or even a modern home. But when you see these relics from the Millennial Kingdom, there's an excitement. You want to be in that building. You want to look at the sculptures and the paintings. That's why they have museums. They're just so enticing because they were built with a power that we just don't have today. They were obviously built by divine hands. And there's only one person I can think of in this whole world who was a skilled builder who had the divine power to actually create such incredible structures. And that is our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, the Master Mason.
That's right. That's mainly because of answered prayers and questions about the staircase built in the 1800s still unanswered. This historic structure in Santa Fe holds a mystery, a staircase that attracts people from all over the world.
Before COVID, we got as many as 250,000 people a year visiting.
Richard Lindsley is the curator at Loretto Chapel. He says the mystery began when the French architect behind the chapel died in 1878, before a staircase to the choir loft was built. So the Sisters of Loretto turned to prayer.
And they said a 9-day prayer in Catholic traditions known as a novena, asking St. Joseph to pray for them to Jesus to help them with their problem. On the last day of their novena, this man rides in off the desert on a donkey, an elderly man with a gray beard as they described him, and told them he had come to build the staircase.
He says the man worked on the staircase for 3 months and then vanished without getting paid, and the lumberyard told them the man didn't get any materials from them.
So that's why the sisters, because of their prayers, his description, and the usual event about the wood, came to the conclusion that our Lord Jesus sent St. Joseph from heaven to build the staircase, and that's why originally it was known as the miraculous staircase.
It represents something absolutely unique. It was put together without any nails.
Randy Randall, executive director for Tourism Santa Fe, says deep history like that attracts tourists to the city.
We're the second oldest city in the United States. We're the oldest capital. We've got a lot of firsts.
And there's still questions about the chapel to this day. First, where did the wood come from? Lindsley said he gave a sample of the wood to a naval scientist in 1995 who said the closest he found to it was a tree that grows only in Alaska, but it wasn't the same. Secondly, how does the staircase stand? It's not supported from below, and there are no nails. It's held together with wooden pegs. Lindsley said he met with more than 100 experts who built circular staircases.
Not one of these 120 American companies said they could reproduce the staircase the way it was built. No civil engineer on the planet has been able to figure it out.
Lastly, who built the staircase? He says all claims have been debunked, and so we're back at square one.
So why does it stand? Nobody knows. Where does wood come from? Nobody knows. And who built it? Nobody knows. And that's why it's still known, even to this day, as the miraculous staircase.
Lindsley says due to the pandemic, business is not what it used to be, but it's getting better as more people feel comfortable traveling again. Back to you.
Though it started as a school, Loretto Chapel has been a museum since 1971.
Welcome back to the channel. This is BTE TV and I am Tony Jackson. Today I'm taking you on a journey, an actual boots on the ground exploration into the buildings and structures of the Millennial Kingdom of Christ. We're going to be heading deep into the granite state of New Hampshire to places so striking and so unusual that you almost have to see them to believe they exist. I will also share my experience with you of the Metropolitan Museum in New York City. Now, I have walked these sites myself, filmed them up close, and now I'm bringing you with me so you can witness the evidence with your own eyes. Now, what you're about to see adds even more weight to the truth that Jesus Christ ruled on earth, and as the master carpenter that he was, left behind some of the most extraordinary architecture this world has ever known. Now, let's dive into the exploration of these buildings and the divine construction techniques used to create them. Okay, one more thing before we begin. I finally do have t-shirts because so many of you have asked for them, and I think you're gonna really like this shirt. It's I'll show it to you. So it does have the Bridgewater Triangle Explorer logo on the front, and then on the back it says Bridgewater Triangle Explorer on YouTube. We are living in Revelation 27, the little season. And what a great talking point. And that'll be, if somebody sees you wearing this, they'll probably stop you and ask you what that means. And this is part of my boots on the ground approach. We don't have like the pamphlet ready yet that we want to, have you guys download, or we might even print something out and then mail them out to everyone. We're not sure yet, but right off the bat, I think this is a great way to spread the word. And these are really high quality shirts. They're 100% cotton. They're pre-shrunk. And I don't know if you can tell, but the quality is really good. These are like really strong, like sturdy material. Like, these aren't thin shirts that are going to rip very easily. So I'm very happy with the quality and the company that I went with. I am also working on different designs, so I'll let you guys know when I have different designs as well. And I'm also going to have knit caps and baseball hats too, but I'm still working on that. I'll leave a link in the description where you can buy this shirt. All right, now, having said that, let's begin. Okay, now I want to talk about Jesus being a carpenter, because honestly, I was curious about this myself, so I just did a simple search. I typed in, was Jesus a carpenter or a stonemason? And this is the search result that came up. It says, Jesus was likely a craftsman skilled in stonemasonry, though the term carpenter in the Bible may also encompass woodwork and general building. Stonemason. Interesting. It says the Greek word, let me highlight that. The Greek word used in the New Testament to describe Jesus' occupation is tekton, often translated as carpenter. However, tekton more broadly means a craftsman or builder, capable of working with wood, stone, or metal, rather than exclusively just being a woodworker. This term reflects the flexible nature of trades in first century Galilee, where artisans often adapted to the materials available. Okay, it goes on to say stone versus wood in Nazareth. And basically what it's saying is trees were very scarce, making woodwork less common, while stone quarries were abundant, especially near Nazareth and the nearby town of Sepphoris, which was undergoing major construction under Herod. It says scholars argue that Joseph, Jesus' father, likely worked as a stonemason, and Jesus would have learned this trade from him, gaining his experience in chiseling, carving, and stacking stone. Mic drop right there. So Jesus was a master at all types of carpentry. It says, carpenter traditions, despite the likelihood of stonework, the New Testament consistently refers to Jesus as a carpenter or carpenter's son, reflecting the traditional translation of tekton. This indicates that Jesus was a general craftsman capable of working with both wood and stone, or that the term was used broadly to describe his role as a skilled artisan in his community. Suggests he was more likely a stonemason or a versatile craftsman. All right, so this sheds a lot of light on, who built all those buildings. Now, was it Jesus himself? Was it the angels? Was it the saints? Nobody really knows. But this is all kind of starting to, the pieces are all starting to fall into place. Let me know what you guys think about this in the comments. I am very curious to know what your thoughts are on Jesus being a stonemason, actually more primarily as opposed to just being someone who worked with wood. All right, we're going to go take a look first at the New Hampshire Historical Society building. Look at the size of that stone. Look at that. Oh, it's open till 5. So they said, look at those windows. They said that this was built in 1904, and they had the stone brought in from Italy. Look at the stonework. these stairs. Look at this is all marble. Detail on the railing. Look at the columns. Built with such precision. Detail of this giant window. And then there's even another window above that. Everything is so perfectly symmetric. Incredible building. Look at the detail on these walls. We've got two different kinds of marble, or is that polished granite? I don't even know. They said this was done in 1904. And the detail work in the ceiling. Look at the detail above this doorway. Right. I didn't want to film her, but she said it was built in 1911. And look at the building across the street. That's another church. Oh no, I'm sorry. That's like the old post office or something, or courthouse. Right across there, you have the annex building, and that's the state capitol building with that golden dome. But look at this massive, incredible building. They say was built in 1911. I just look at that. And she said that's marble that was brought, interior was marble brought from Italy, and the rest of it was granite brought from that granite that's local to New Hampshire. Look at the size of these stones. How did they look at the detail of the stonework? Can't imagine what the basement looks like. Look at that. The way the stone tapers too, it's like laser precision. Great library. And this building itself is super impressive. Again, you've got these massive columns. Look at these marble columns. And what are those little faces above them? Are those faces? I don't know what those are. That, what that is. Gargoyles or something. Incredible. no tour of Concord would be, even that church is kind of impressive. This steeple on that. That old brick building. But no tour would be complete without looking at the actual Capitol building itself. This building is massive. There's no way that people in the 1900s, early 1900s or late 1800s built this. There's no way. Look at the size of the columns on the front of that building. Incredible. Look at the stone. The size of these stones. These weigh tons. Look at the doors. The doors got to be 40 feet tall. Well, not the doors itself, but the door frame. Nation's oldest state house, 1819. They say this was built in 1819. Look at the size of these columns. Whew. Some other buildings across the street that are just as impressive. This is Franklin High School in Franklin, New Hampshire. And I just want to show you the incredible detail in those big blocks of stone. And then, all right, so this is the high school. And then you can see the addition. This is how we build now. And this is how they used to build. Okay, now speaking of building techniques, we're going to look at a video of some of the techniques used to build stone walls today. I'll be honest, I had a very hard time finding any information, any videos of these stone buildings being built like today using today's techniques. I couldn't find one. I found retaining walls. I found, dry stone walls, which is, again, it's totally different than the structures we're seeing where everything was like completely polished and straight and smooth and no mortar. But I couldn't find anything. If anyone has any information on that, leave it in the comments. But let's take a look at this and then we'll discuss. But it's even more evidence that they don't know how these buildings were built. They can't even do it today. All right, here we go.
So while the guys are shaping the stones, I am trying to keep them well stocked with the good stones that are ready to be shaped. So right now I am looking through this giant pile of stones, trying to find stones that have a decently flat edge and are only about 20 centimeters thick. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm hoping that I'll be able to find a bunch in here. Some are way too big, some are a little too small, so we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
Aí. Piano.
Sì. Così? Molto bene.
Okay, so you see what it takes just to make that, and that is got full rebar reinforcement with wood framing behind it, and the stones are obviously not flat, they're not even, we're not talking like perfect 90-degree angles, laser precision cut. You see how much work it takes just to do what they're doing, which is just a stone facade. You know, it's laughable that people think that in the 1800s those buildings were built, when you can see how much work it takes even today with the concrete mixer and all that. Even by hand, today's techniques, it still doesn't explain how those massive laser precision cut buildings were done. So and again, if someone can find videos of them building stone buildings today, I would love to see it, but I couldn't find one. All right, let's continue. Okay, now we're going to watch a video by Old World Secrets about lighthouses. Again, I know that people say that this is an AI channel, but the information is valid. And I think this is important to understand that how these lighthouses are, what they're designed to do, and how they say they were built, and how it just doesn't make any sense that they were built in the time period that they say with the technology that they had at the time. So let's take a look at this real quick.
What we're served up as the heroic feat of Victorian-era builders turns out, upon closer examination, to be the most brazen falsification in the history of technical progress. Take a look at the La Jument lighthouse, or the famous Rocolle. Gaze at these lonely stone spires piercing the sky, where any modern platform, built using satellite calculations and titanium alloys, would be destroyed by the first serious storm. We're told these structures were erected in the mid-19th century, without helicopters, without floating cranes, without quick-setting concrete. Just ponder the official version. A group of workers in rowboats approaches a rock jutting a few feet out of the water and builds a tower 165 feet tall, withstanding wave strikes weighing hundreds of tons. Do you seriously believe this? Let's cast aside the school textbooks and engage critical thinking. We're at the point where official history collides with the laws of physics and logistics, and physics here is clearly not on the historian's side. Take, for example, the Armen Lighthouse in France, which the keepers themselves called Hell of Hells. Official sources claim construction began in 1867. We're told a touching tale of how brave Bretons landed on slippery rocks during low tide. Do you know how much time they had? According to official reports, in the first year of construction, workers managed to land on the rock just 7 times. 7 times in a year, and spent a total of 8 hours there. In 8 hours of work per year, they supposedly drilled holes for the foundation into granite harder than steel. Have you ever tried drilling wet granite with a hand auger, standing waist deep in icy water, when the ocean could sweep you away any second? It's not just difficult, it's physiologically impossible. But historians insist they did it. Here's where it gets really interesting. If you open the construction estimates and logs from that time, you'll find strange inconsistencies. The volumes of materials needed to erect such a tower number in the thousands of tons of granite and cement. Tell me, how on earth could you deliver thousands of tons of granite to a lonely rock in the middle of the Atlantic on wooden sailing ships? We're talking about the 19th century. No dynamic positioning systems for ships existed. Any attempt to approach the rocks close enough to unload heavy cargo, amid the constant swells typical of these latitudes, would end with the ship simply being smashed against the rocks. But the lighthouses stand. They stand where even today construction would require billion-dollar investments and unique technologies available to only a couple of corporations worldwide. And we're asked to believe that fishermen did this with pickaxes and shovels. There's another point that tour guides mysteriously remain silent about: the foundation. Any construction engineer will tell you that hydraulic concrete can't set if it's constantly swamped by waves. To build a lighthouse base at water level or below it, you need a caisson or a completely dry platform for an extended period. The official version states they used quick-setting cement. In the mid-19th century? Seriously? The technologies of that time barely allowed for quality port structures in calm harbors, and here we're talking about an aggressive, salty environment and constant vibration from wave impacts. Salt water erodes the binding mortars of that time in just a few seasons. But these lighthouses have stood for more than a century and a half, and their masonry looks monolithic, as if it were melted rather than laid from individual blocks. This suggests entirely different stone processing technologies we've lost or been forbidden to use. Gaze closely at photographs of the Bell Rock Lighthouse. It's the oldest surviving offshore lighthouse. Its construction dates to the early 19th century. Historians proudly declare it a wonder of the world. But if you analyze the blueprints, you'll see the use of dovetail joints in the stone blocks. Each block weighs more than a ton. Carving such a lock manually in granite with jewelry-like precision so that water doesn't penetrate the joints, this is a task for a CNC machine, not a chisel and hammer. And most importantly, why such complexities? Why such excessive strength if, according to the official version, the lighthouse is just a navigation marker? What if these aren't lighthouses at all? What if their true purpose was entirely different, and the lanterns on top were lit later, when the new masters of the world came to the ruins of a past civilization and repurposed the surviving giant structures for their own needs? The system lies to us not only about the construction methods, but also about the conditions in which it happened. We're approaching the most terrifying question. Why does no one consider sea level? All these impossible constructions become completely logical and straightforward if we allow for just one fact that official science furiously denies: the fact that the water level was entirely different. Imagine the ocean being lower by 165 feet, or perhaps even 330 feet. Then these rocks weren't deadly traps in the midst of the abyss, but hilltops or mountains on land. And building on them could be done calmly, transporting materials by roads that now lie on the seabed. But to admit this means admitting that quite recently, in the observable historical past, a planetary-scale catastrophe occurred that changed the world map beyond recognition. A catastrophe that's being carefully hidden from us, feeding us fairy tales about heroic stonemasons. Ponder why all these lighthouses have such strange architecture. Narrow towers widening at the base, resembling technical nodes of some gigantic energy grid more than living quarters for keepers. Inside these towers, it's cramped, uncomfortable, impossible to live there. The psyche of the people working at lighthouses often couldn't withstand it. Why? Perhaps because these structures were never intended for people? Their shape, their location, their incredible strength indicate that they were nodes of a single system, built by an advanced civilization in times when Earth's geography was different. And then the water came. The flood came, washing away cities, roads, and factories, leaving protruding above the surface only the tops of the tallest and strongest structures. And these tops we now call lighthouses. Official history is falling apart at the seams when we start cross-referencing dates and facts. We're told about a boom in lighthouse construction in the mid-19th century. Precisely at that time, thousands of the most complex structures were supposedly built worldwide. Where did the resources come from? Where did the qualified workforce come from after, as we're told, the devastating Napoleonic Wars and a series of revolutions? The population statistics of that time don't match the construction volumes. This is a demographic paradox. There were few people. They lived short lives. Technologies were primitive, but cities grew like mushrooms, sprouting granite embankments and cyclopean towers in the ocean. Here's the catch that anyone who has ever tried to build even a summer cottage with their own hands senses. We're dealing with appropriation. We are a scavenger civilization that occupied others' homes, unearthed others' factories, and called them our own. Watch the historians' hands. They show us paintings, engravings where sturdy workers lay stones. But why in photographs from the same period do we often see already completed structures surrounded by scaffolding, but without the workers themselves? Or with people who look like ragged tramps posing against the grandeur they clearly couldn't have created? This is the classic scheme of substitution. Create the illusion of a process to hide the result. Lighthouses are just the tip of the iceberg protruding from the water. What's hidden beneath the ocean's depths terrifies modern scientists to the bone. Because if you descend to the base of these rocks, you can find traces of stone processing extending deep into the abyss. Who processed the rocks at a depth of 165 feet? 19th century scuba divers? Or those who lived there when it was dry land? Let's move from general doubts to dry, merciless figures that demolish the official version faster than an ocean wave washes away a sand castle. We're talking about logistics. Logistics is what breaks any historian's fantasies. Take, for example, a standard sea lighthouse of that time, standing on a remote rock. The weight of such a structure ranges from 3,000 to 6,000 tons. That's only the above water part. Add the weight of the foundation, auxiliary equipment, and scaffolding. We get a colossal mass of cargo that needs not just to be transported from point A to point B, but delivered to conditions with no pier, no crane, and no level surface. Historians claim that transportation was carried out by small sailing barges or schooners. The cargo capacity of such a vessel in the mid-19th century, while maintaining maneuverability in dangerous waters, did not exceed 50 or 70 tons. Let's do some elementary math. To transport 4,000 tons of granite, it would require about 80 trips. And that's just the stone. Plus cement, tools, provisions, fresh water for workers and for mixing mortar. That's hundreds of trips. In the conditions of the North Atlantic or Bay of Biscay, navigation is possible for at most 3 or 4 months a year, and even then with major interruptions for storms. Official reports state that some lighthouses were built in 3 or 4 years. If you divide the number of required trips by the number of working days, it turns out that a ship had to approach the rock every day, without weekends or holidays, unload and depart. Can you imagine unloading multi-ton granite blocks in a Force 3 swell? A sailing ship can't just stop and hit the handbrake. It needs to be held in place with a complex system of anchors and ropes. In the surf zone, where the water boils from strikes against the rocks, any helmsman's error means death. A wooden ship's hull would splinter against granite in seconds upon impact. But we're told that hundreds of trips passed successfully, without losses, without modern radio communication or weather forecasts. This is a statistical anomaly. This is impossible. Now look at the blocks themselves. These aren't just boulders piled in a heap. These are shaped elements carved with machine precision. Engineers call it stereotomy, the art of cutting stone into complex shapes. Lighthouse blocks often feature a tenon mortise system, not only in the horizontal plane, but also in the vertical. They interlock with each other like pieces of a gigantic three-dimensional puzzle. Achieving such precise fitting on the shore is difficult. Doing it in a quarry, then hoping that during assembly on a rocking rock under an icy shower everything aligns to the millimeter, this is madness. If even one block has a deviation of a couple of millimeters, the entire structure will twist. And filing granite with a rasp while dangling on a rope over the abyss is a hopeless endeavor. The conclusion follows. Either these blocks were cast right on site using geopolymer concrete technology, the secret of which is being hidden from us, or, more likely, no one built anything. These towers were already standing there, standing for thousands of years. And the builders of the 19th century were simply engaged in their repair, cleaning, and installation of their primitive oil lantern atop an ancient, high-tech device. Notice the absence of construction sites. Where did the workers live? On Rokel Rock, for example, there's simply no place to pitch a tent. There's no level ground. We're told tall tales that workers lived on ships anchored nearby, but any sailor will tell you that anchoring in the open ocean next to rocks is suicide. At night, the wind can shift, and the ship will be dashed against the rocks. So the ships had to return to port every evening? That's hours of travel there and back. When did they work? It turns out they had only a couple of hours a day. At such a schedule, construction of the Largemont Lighthouse would have taken not 5 years, but 50. There's one more detail that gives away the falsification completely. It's the cranes. On old engravings, they're depicted as wooden cranes, anchored directly to the rock. But to anchor a crane that lifts a 2-ton block, you first need to build a foundation for that crane. And to build the foundation, you need to deliver materials. It's a vicious circle. Without a crane, you can't build a crane. Modern helicopters solve this problem in an hour, but there were no helicopters then. How did they lift the first beam? How did they secure the winch on smooth, wave-washed stone? The physics of the lever is inexorable. To lift a load at the end of the boom, you need a counterweight or a powerful anchor fastening. In granite, without drills and chemical anchors, creating a reliable anchor point for a heavy crane is practically impossible within the time allotted by the official version. And let's not forget the human factor. Who were these people? We're told they were simple stonemasons, but working at such heights, under constant stress and isolation, requires training on the level of special forces or astronauts. Mortality should have been colossal. People should have been swept away by waves, dying from hypothermia and injuries. But in official documents, silence. Only a few died. It looks like a picnic report, not the construction of the century in hell. Either the documents are forged to hide the mass death of slaves, or there was no construction at all. We're confronted with the fact that the technology level of the 19th century absolutely doesn't match the complexity of the objects attributed to it. It's like being told that Egyptian pyramids were built by peasants with copper saws. Only with lighthouses, the situation is even more absurd, because pyramids stand on solid ground, while lighthouses are in an aggressive, deadly environment. We see the result of a civilization that surpassed us in understanding materials and strength of materials. A civilization that could afford to build monumental structures, where today we fear even to sail. But why? Why would someone in deep antiquity need to place these spires around the entire perimeter of continents? If we accept the theory of low water levels, the picture starts to clarify. These aren't navigation markers for ships. These are geodetic benchmarks, or perhaps nodes of atmospheric electricity. Look at the shape of the Fresnel lens. This is the most complex optical device that appeared suddenly, out of nowhere, immediately in a ready, perfect form. The technology for processing glass of such purity and such complex curvature on an industrial scale at the beginning of the 19th century raises no fewer questions than the granite blocks. Open old maps. No, not the ones hanging in the geography classroom, but genuine 16th and 17th century navigation portolans that miraculously survived in private collections and closed archives. If you overlay them on modern satellite images, a cold sweat will break out. The coastline on them looks entirely different. Where today the Atlantic waves rage, old maps mark cities, roads, and star-shaped fortresses. Those very rocks where lonely lighthouses now huddle are marked as hilltops or watchtowers on the outskirts of large land settlements. This changes everything. Absolutely everything. We're approaching the key moment of our investigation, which official science tries to talk away with terms about the inaccuracy of ancient cartography. We're told that medieval sailors couldn't draw maps, that they erred by hundreds of miles. Do you believe that people capable of crossing oceans under sail couldn't distinguish an island from a shoal or land from sea? This is a lie designed to hide the catastrophe. The truth is that the world ocean level rose, and this happened not millions of years ago, but quite recently by historical standards. Literally yesterday. Look at lighthouse foundations from a hydrological perspective. Modern studies of the seabed around such objects as the Eddystone or Bishop Rock lighthouses reveal strange anomalies. Echo sounders draw pictures that geologists call natural formations, but any architect will see ruins in them. From the base of the rocks on which the lighthouses stand, long, straight ridges often extend, remarkably resembling submerged roads or remnants of fortress walls. Officially, this is explained by geological faults, but nature doesn't build straight lines and right angles. We see remnants of infrastructure that went underwater. Now imagine the situation in the 19th century. The world has just experienced something horrific. A global cataclysm, a flood, clay rain, call it what you will. The water rose, swallowing coastal plains. Surviving people, our civilization, are redeveloping this changed world. They venture out to sea and see the tops of giant, ancient structures protruding from the water. Towers that were once part of city fortifications or an energy grid from a past era have now turned into islands. What do the new masters of life do? They don't build them from scratch. They lack the strength, technology, or resources for that. They simply approach the surviving towers, perform cosmetic repairs, hang a plaque reading "Built in 18XX", and claim the merits of ancient architects for themselves. This explains the absence of normal construction documentation and oddities in the datings. Often, construction start dates differ by decades across sources. Why? Because these weren't construction start dates, but dates of discovery and deconservation of the object. Photographs passed off as the construction process most often show the already completed tower in scaffolding. Where's the foundation pit? Where's the foundation laying process? They're absent because the foundation extends hundreds of feet underwater to where there was once solid ground. Workers in the photos are simply cleaning the facade and mounting stairs. They look like ants crawling over a dinosaur skeleton. Let's talk about materials. The granite from which the lighthouses are made often differs in composition from the rock of the cliff it's standing on. Geologists shyly avert their eyes when asked how that's possible. If the lighthouse was built from local stone, why is it different? And if the stone was hauled hundreds of miles, why when there's a whole rock right underfoot? The answer is simple. It's artificial stone. Geopolymer concrete of the highest quality, which an ancient civilization produced on an industrial scale. They could cast these towers monolithically, layer by layer, right on site. This explains the absence of seams, the incredible strength, and the complex geometry of the blocks. We, having stumbled upon these technologies, still can't replicate their recipe, calling it simply granite. There's another aspect about which it's customary to remain silent. Bathymetry. Depth charts. If you carefully study the nautical charts around famous lighthouses, you'll discover that many of them stand on the edges of vast underwater plateaus. These were former continental shelves that were land before the flood. The lighthouses marked the boundaries of these lands. They weren't navigation markers for ships, but geodetic markers, border posts, or repeaters standing on elevations. When the water came, it concealed the plains, but couldn't conceal these colossal spires. Historians try to convince us that in an era when in London people died of cholera due to the lack of sewerage, and the main transport was the horse, the government spent colossal budgets on building palaces for lanterns in the middle of the ocean. Why such luxury? Why make lighthouse entrance portals in the form of antique arches with columns? Who would appreciate this architecture amid a storm? Fish? This architectural extravagance reveals the true origin of the objects. They were built as part of grand ensembles, intended for the eyes of people living in cities around these towers. Cities that now sleep under layers of silt and sand. Recall the legends of sunken lands. Atlantis, Lemuria, Kitezhgrad, Lyonesse. The folklore of all the world's peoples preserves the memory of how the sea swallowed land. Lighthouses are the only material evidence we have left on the surface. They stand like gravestones for a perished civilization. And when a 19th century lighthouse keeper lit the lamp, he unwittingly activated a surviving node of an alien system. We also need to ask what's beneath the lighthouses. Some old reports mention cellars and tunnels extending deep into the rock. Why does a lighthouse need a deep cellar? To store kerosene? But the dampness there is such that any metal would rust away. What if these shafts lead to underground communications that connected these objects into a single network even before they became islands? Modern enthusiast researchers trying to scan lighthouse bases with ground-penetrating radars encounter their equipment going haywire or showing voids of precise geometric shapes deep within the rock mass. Now that we've understood that the lighthouse buildings themselves are ancient, pre-flood structures, it's time to look inside. And what we'll find there will finally demolish the myth of 19th century primitiveness. We're talking about technologies that official science calls simply ingenious engineering solutions. But any physicist, if honest, would call them impossible anachronisms. The main secret is hidden in the very heart of the lighthouse, in its rotating mechanism and optical system. Have you ever heard of mercury baths? Official history states that to smoothly rotate the giant lens, whose weight could reach several tons, 19th century engineers devised placing it in a bowl filled with liquid mercury. Supposedly, this reduced friction almost to zero. Sounds logical? Only to those who've never worked with hazardous metals. We're talking about tons of mercury. At the Cape Lighthouse, for example, hundreds of gallons of this toxic liquid metal were used. Imagine the scene: a wooden ship, a storm, and stevedores hauling barrels of mercury onto the rock. One clumsy move, and the spilled metal would poison all life around for decades. But we're told this was standard practice. However, why such complexities? Ordinary bearings, even primitive ones, could handle the rotation task. Why use a rare, insanely expensive, and deadly dangerous material? The answer lies in the physical properties of mercury, about which museums remain silent. Mercury is not just a lubricant. In ancient texts, in Indian Vimanas, mercury is described as a key element of engines and energy generators. It's an ideal conductor, capable of interacting with electromagnetic fields. If you spin mercury in a closed loop, you'll get a powerful vortex effect capable of generating energy or creating anti-gravity fields. Lighthouses are not lanterns, they are generators. The mercury baths under the lenses were needed not to reduce friction, but to create a rotating plasma field. The lighthouse structure itself is a giant inductance coil. The stone tower, often reinforced with metal, stands in salt water, which is an excellent electrolyte. This is a ready scheme for harvesting atmospheric electricity, that very ether energy that Nikola Tesla later tried to rediscover and for which he was erased from history. Lighthouses were nodes of wireless energy transmission. They didn't emit light. They radiated energy, powering those very star-shaped fortresses and cities whose ruins we find worldwide.
Okay, now let's get back to the state of New Hampshire, and you're going to come with me as I film some more absolutely incredible, impossible buildings. There's no way these were built in the 1800s, or they say they were built in the early 1900s, actually. There's absolutely no way. We can't even build like that today. And I did have a conversation with the curator of the museum that I went to, and you'll see that coming up. And I spilled the beans. I just told her, I said, I think that that this building was built by Jesus Christ during the Millennial Kingdom. And I told her all about it, and she politely smiled and nodded, and then I left, and she probably thinks I'm crazy. But I had to say it. I had to tell her because I needed her to hear the truth, because she's telling people that this building was built in 1911, and they got some of the stone came from Italy and some of it came from New Hampshire, and it just doesn't make any sense. Anyway, you'll see. All right, so let's take a look. More buildings from New Hampshire. Here we go. All right, I'm just making this video of downtown Concord, New Hampshire, just to show people how incredible these old buildings are. I never get tired of driving down this road. This is South State Street in Concord, New Hampshire, and it's where the Capitol building is. And there's some amazing old churches you're going to see in a minute. Okay, you can see there's one right here on the left. There's this old building here on the right. You can see the old brickwork is just incredible. And then these churches coming up here. There's one on the left and one on the right. The one on the left is all, I believe it's granite block. It's just, it looks like something you'd see in, Italy or France. Absolutely incredible. Look at this. Another old building on the corner here. Another old church right here. But this church on the left, I gotta pull over for this one. This church is just always just blows my mind. To be Mary Baker Eddy.
Right, she invented and started Christian Science.
Wow, look at that window on all that stained glass. And that's all stone, right?
The outside of it's all stone, the rest of it's wood on the inside.
That's wood?
Called the rose window.
Wow.
Yeah, it's wood. They just had that rebuilt this past spring.
That's absolutely. Look at the stonework, how it's cut perfectly around.
Oh yeah, they did it right. It was built in. They built this building in 1 year.
They built this building in 1 year?
Yeah, 1 year.
Wow.
Yep.
Look at the doors. Even now, those aren't the original doors, are they?
I don't know if they're original. They've been here a real long time, and we just had them refinished outside.
Yeah. Wow.
4 inches thick.
Wow.
It's a real deal for doors.
So 1903, and they built it in 1 year.
Yep.
Incredible. It's almost like a miracle, right? Hey.
Oh yeah, they did it right. It was built in. They built this building in 1 year. Oh yeah, they did it right. It was built in. They built this building in 1 year. They built this building in 1 year.
All right, so that gentleman says this was built in 1903 in 1 year. I highly doubt that. Highly doubt that. Okay, and then even this building. Look at these windows. Look at the stained glass and the architectural detail around those windows. Look at that steeple. I think it still has the real bell. All right, so I was looking into the population of Concord, New Hampshire. I was just curious what it was in 1903 when that church was... Sorry, Max is quite active at this time of night. And I found something very interesting. It says... All right, in 1840, the population in Concord was 4,897. In 1850, it increased by 5.8% and went to 8,576 population. In 1860, it increased by 2.4%. Okay, and it went from 8,500 to 10,896. I don't know if this is a typo, and I don't know if you can see that, but from 1860 to 1990, the population only grew by 0.9%. Is that, this has got to be a mistake. Or again, I don't know, or it's part of the, the cover up or something. That's just really bizarre. That it's, in 10 years it increases by 5%, but in 130 years it only increases by 0.9%. Anyway, very strange. And again, maybe that's because the whole country at that time was being repopulated. I don't know, but something is wrong with these numbers. If anyone has any more information on this, let me know. The other thing I found interesting was I found drawings of that church. Okay, and at first you're like, oh, wow, yeah, I guess they did build it. But this looks like literally, like just, looks like a drawing. It doesn't look like a drawing you could build from. It looks like an artist rendering of the church. Okay, now I don't know this for 100%. I'm not 100% sure. But then if we look at the interior one, it's the same. I mean, there's no structural details, right? So, yeah, this may look very complex, but it really is just a drawing and someone put dimensions on it. And for all we know, the dimensions were added later. I don't know. If anyone can confirm this, let me know. But again, I don't see... I mean, there's a scale, there's a drawing number here, but I couldn't find any structural details on the interior or the exterior or any foundation plans. And that's the other thing. If you look at the foundation, okay, they designed windows and doors, windows, below grade. Like, why? Why would you have windows? This is grade right here. Why would you have windows that are below grade? It doesn't make any sense. Anyway, if anyone does have any information on the legitimacy of these drawings, please leave that in the comments. I'm very curious to know. Okay, here's another one, or a couple of them. This whole area right here. These are all the state buildings, the local town office buildings. I'm going to pull over. This whole are registered, reserved in Hampshire Senate. Okay. I can't park here. Alright, I'm going to park right here. Okay, and then while I'm here, this is, again, downtown Concord. These are all the state buildings. This is the state annex building. And the insides are just as impressive. I've been in some of these. That is the United States Post Office and the courthouse building. Look at that. And there's the, that's the museum. Concord Museum. There's the state library. There's another church. And that museum, they say, was built in 1904. And they said that stone was brought in from Italy. Massive 20, 30, 40 foot sections of granite brought in from Italy. It's incredible. This whole place is incredible. And this is the other side of it. Now that is not something you see every day. That's very cool. Okay, I'm going around the side of the castle now. This is what used to be the basement. Some graffiti in there, obviously. Oh yeah, it's a nice pentagram on the wall. Super quiet here. Too quiet. Look at these old bricks. Must have been like an old flue or something. Well, they don't build things the way they used to. Everything used to be made out of stone, all stone. There's hardly any wood. I think this castle was built in the early 1900s. Some kind of a bar there. Look at this place. Incredible. Wow. First of all, it is so quiet up here. This is the basement of the castle. And I don't think I'm going in there. I'm not going in there. The cemetery I passed. Look at that. This is the Franklin Falls Dam. Look at that. Look at that.
Wait, you got the water right under us.
Look at that. And that controls the Merrimack River. Gorgeous. Nice. This is Tartarian, or Old World, because the door is massive, like 20 feet high. About a year ago, I went to the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City, and we're going to look at the footage that I took while I was there. Now, I just want to show you something right off the bat. If you type this in to your browser search bar, notice it says established April 13th, 1870. It doesn't say built. It says established. Now, let's go on the Wikipedia page and see what it says. All right. After negotiations with the city of New York in 1871, the Met, that's what they call it for short, was granted the land. A red brick and stone building was designed by American architect Calvert Vaux and his collaborator Jacob Mould. Vaux's ambitious building was not well received. It looked like a mausoleum. Within 20 years, a new plan was engulfing the Vaux building, was already being executed. The wings that completed the Fifth Avenue facade in the 1910s were designed by the firm of McKim, Mead, and White. Glass sides and rear of the museum are the work of... It totally skips by the whole. When was the original building built? It just skims by the design. It talks about the design, but then it just skims past and goes right to like all the additions. And actually, when I was there, I asked the curator about it, and they said the same thing. She started talking about how, oh, well, the West Wing was built in this year, and I'm like, well, when was the original? The original 1880 building. The museum building is of over 20 structures. Anyway, this is all. I'm pretty sure this is all just hogwash. So I was in this building, and I can tell you, this building is absolutely astonishing. It's just one of the most incredible buildings I've ever been in. There's stone columns and stone blocks that are over 80 feet tall. There's no way that this was built by human hands. I can tell you that. Yeah, see expansion. Yeah, I don't trust any of this. None of this makes sense. It was built in the 1800s. Come on. You'll see this building is massive, and it is so architecturally complex and sophisticated. You're speechless, especially when you're actually there. But I'm going to show you the footage that I took while I was there. Okay, let's take a look. Look at the size of the windows. What? Don't tell me that they built this in the 1800s.
House is in Georgia and they have this high. I can show you. And they have this kind of windows now. Because it's beautiful. Not because people want to. Okay, it was part of status.
Let's look at on the ceiling.
Yeah, you're afraid, yes, that something should happen.
Look at this. So this bedroom is bigger than most people's homes. Look at on the ceiling. The angels. Why did they depict angels like that as children? That's not, the Bible didn't say angels look like children. I don't get that. So after watching this video, I hope it is now clear who is responsible for all of the incredible infrastructure that we see all over the world. No, it wasn't the aliens, it wasn't the Tartarians, and it certainly was not the Freemasons who have taken all the credit. It was the saints and the angels under the direction, supervision, and power of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. And now, having said that, thank you all for watching. God bless you all, and good night.